Way back when this was initially announced, I shed a single tear for the death of one of my favorite franchises. I knew I wasn't gonna like it. The Ninja Theory badge, the edgy changes to Dante, everything I saw about it made me know deep down I just wouldn't like it. I shut my eyes and I covered my ears to any news. It was better to just pretend it didn't exist. After reviewing Heavenly Sword and Enslaved Odyssey to the West, I figured I needed to see if Ninja Theory succeeded in making something that was finally worth playing. Ninja Theory is 3 for 3 on making really simple, boring action games. I wouldn't even call DmC a true action game. I'd label it and most of Ninja Theory's games as a subgenre of cinematic action. This section is going to include spoilers, so skip to this timecode if you wish to avoid them. The game starts with Mundus, a demon who is working on taking over the world, oddly enough, in a rather interesting way. Mundus' plan to take over the world involves ownership of banks, the media, and a soda corporation. Then he realizes the only thing standing in his way to total domination is the son of Sparta, Dante. Dante is in his dumpy trailer after boning some strippers, and the developers proceed to take a dump on everything we loved about Dante and the real Devil May Cry. A hunter sucks him into Limbo and causes a huge amount of havoc in what I can only assume is Coney Island. Limbo is a bit strange. It's basically a surreal parallel world where things that happen in Limbo affect the real world and vice versa, but not all the time. While in Limbo, a girl tells Dante that he needs to run because he can't fight the hunter because it's bulletproof, but obviously you end up killing the damn thing anyways. The girl reveals herself to be Kat, a psychic medium slash healer, and she takes Dante to the Order's hangout, which is even dumpier than Dante's trailer. A mysterious figure who looks exactly like Dante takes Dante to his childhood home, and Dante learns that he is his twin brother Virgil. Virgil reveals that he and Dante are Nephilim, and that Mundus killed their angel mother and imprisoned their demon father, and plots to destroy Mundus. Virgil's plan to stop the big bad demon king Mundus is to destroy a soda pop factory and the local news station. The soda factory is first. You go into Limbo and find the succubus, where you have a very intellectual conversation.
Fuck you! Fuck you! Fuck you!
Then afterwards, you're tasked with taking out the news, headed by a very obvious Bill O'Reilly stand-in.
This is Bob Barbas, just doing God's work.
You meet a blind man named Phineas who needs his eye back, so you go and get it for him. After you get his eye back, he tells you to kill Mundus' heir and leaves, never to be seen again.
Nothing will hurt him more. Breaking news, Bob. You're fired.
Then Dante goes and murders Bob Barbas, the demon news anchor, and returns to Virgil and crew who are under attack by a SWAT team. Dante helps Virgil and Kat destroy the mainframe, but Kat is captured because you're stuck in Limbo and you can't do anything to help her. Virgil is ready to abandon Kat and just let Mundus kill her, but Dante decides that he has to be a white knight and save her with an elaborate plan to kidnap Lilith, who is pregnant with Mundus' baby, and do a hostage exchange. Dante ends up breaking into a nightclub, beats up a pregnant woman, and takes her hostage. Mundus, for whatever reason, agrees to the hostage exchange. During the exchange, Virgil is a total badass and shoots Lilith twice. Once in the baby, and once in the head. Virgil and Dante have a discussion about morality and how Virgil is a huge dick. Then Kat wakes up to create an elaborate plan on a chalkboard to infiltrate Mundus' tower. Virgil and Dante scale the tower for what feels like hours and eventually reach Mundus. You have a terrible battle versus Mundus and win. Of course, you've noticed it's mission 19 and they're obviously going to take it all the way to 20. Virgil reveals that he's going to take over where Mundus left off and rule mankind. Dante gets mad and they fight. Wow, I'm sure nobody saw that one coming.
What did you just say?
Dante wins, obviously, and Kat begs Dante not to kill Virgil. Dante says something stupid, and Virgil leaves. Dante and Kat walk away. Dante tries to cop a feel of Kat's ass, even though she's revealed she's emotionally scarred from being molested as a child, and has a currently broken arm and God knows what other injuries from being tortured by Mundus. What a real hero.
Remember this place?
So first things first, DmC, Devil May Cry, is very heavy-handed with the story. You're basically given a cutscene after every single battle. That gets really grating because I want to, you know, play the game. The original Devil May Cry's had story, and they were actually quite cutscene heavy, but they were usually at the beginning of the mission, before the boss fight, and at the end of the mission. So let's go through the beats. Kat is probably the most damaged female protagonist I have ever seen. Ninja Theory is seriously 3 for 3 on sympathy pandering here. About halfway through the game, she goes on about how she was molested by her foster father who was a demon, because humans can't be evil in this game, so she's emotionally damaged from that. Then the game has her be captured and tortured, so she's physically damaged. The sad thing is I just didn't care at all. The second her and Dante are talking in the car about her past and how she was molested, I was checking out, man. You can write good and interesting women in games without relying on them having very easy and obvious weaknesses and being emotionally scarred via horrific things happening to them. It's blatant sympathy pandering, and Ninja Theory is seriously one of the worst offenders of it I've ever seen. You've got Nariko in Heavenly Sword being emotionally damaged because her clan hates her because she was cursed at birth. Then she takes up the sword and has an inevitable death waiting for her. Trip an enslaved Odyssey to the West is too weak to get back to her village on her own and enslaves Monkey to do so. Then when you finally reach her village, it's been destroyed and her father is killed. They just can't keep getting away with doing the same stuff over and over. I saw what they were doing in Heavenly Sword and it was old before Enslaved even came out. I also don't buy that Mundus, a demon, would be so up in arms about you killing his heir. He's the Demon King, and it's stated that as long as he's near the Hellgate, he's immortal. Why would an immortal care about an heir? I'm sure he has multiple concubines at his beck and call as the most powerful demon, so shouldn't he have multiple heirs on the go? If they set up that it was difficult for demons to conceive, sure, I can buy it. But they never established that. It falls flat. I don't think demons have the same emotional attachment to children that humans would. Virgil's reveal as being evil is completely obvious. It's basically trying to be just like Devil May Cry 3, and a lot of Virgil's moves are copy-pasted, albeit absolutely neutered, like most of this reboot. Overall, honestly, I respect that they tried to do something different with the story than the classic DmC, but it wasn't different enough. They could have done something dramatically different with the Dante-Virgil dynamic, but right at the end, they do exactly what you expect to happen, and that's not good. I don't know why Ninja Theory put an extreme emphasis on platforming sections into the DmC reboot, but they decided to, and it's all completely mindless. You have access to your standard abilities like air hike, but this time you have a new angel dash and 2 grappling hooks.
Getting the hang of this.
You hold L2 and you press square when you see a blue thing, it pulls you towards it. You hold R2 and press square when you see a red thing, and it pulls it towards you. As a guy who loves grappling mechanics in games, I found this to be completely worthless to any kind of platforming. There are so many sections with the same run, jump, angel glide, grapple to something with R2, angel glide again, grapple to something with L2, repeat. It was just ridiculous. They aren't fun or even challenging. There are so many of these sections that it's actually ridiculous. And that color-coded R2, L2 thing applies to combat as well. It's all color-coded. You hit the blue guys with the L2 weapons, and you hit the red guys with the R2 weapons. Is that fun? It's mindless, and it's also objectively bad. It removes choices from your arsenal. You can't damage certain enemies using certain weapons. If your favorite weapon is the Rebellion, and a blue enemy shows up, you actively can't damage it until you press L2 and use Osiris or Aquila. I will say right now that I found the blue weapons significantly less fun to use and significantly weaker than Rebellion or either of the R2 weapons. This color-coded mechanic is not deep, it's not interesting, it's just bad. Limiting a player's options and choices and forcing them down a certain path is not fun. It's all color-coded and that's completely worthless. See red, R2. See blue, L2. It's one of my biggest complaints with the combat system. Not once did I ever feel engaged in the combat. It may be different on the higher difficulties, but on normal, with turbo enabled, which increases the game speed by 20%, the entire game was still a joke. Without turbo enabled, the game is an absolute snorefest. It's so slow, and the reduced speed makes dodging and permanently juggling enemies a complete joke. With turbo enabled, it's at least possible to lose your juggle or get hit every now and then. Devil Trigger is also really insane in this game. On top of the standard buffed attacks and HP regeneration, it now causes all enemies to be airborne for the duration, which is easily one of the most effective strategies in DmC. It is insanely easy to do infinite aerial combos. Enemies are stun locked and you can have your way with them while they're airborne. It is so disgustingly easy to execute by using the 2 chains in the game and an easy launch combo that you can spend 90% of the fight in the air. You don't even need to launch. You can jump and pull enemies towards you in the air, combo them, send them flying, and gain height by pulling yourself towards them. I started almost every battle with either a launch or just straight jumping into an arbiter pull. It's how I dealt with almost every smaller enemy in the entire game. This makes it very easy and very non-threatening. Chainsaw guys with shields, it doesn't matter. You just pull them into the air and 100 to 0 them while airborne and they're completely defenseless. Once you understand that infinite aerial combos are the way to go, the game completely becomes just going through the motions. You can't do it to a handful of enemies and the very few bosses in the game, but everything else is just trashed by this combo. Now that I've told you how to completely break the game, let's just get into one of DmC's staples, which is the Devil Arms. Rebellion is your bread and butter. Honestly, it's usually my preferred weapon in Devil May Cry, but it feels a bit underwhelming here. Rebellion is always your balanced weapon with a good balance of speed and power. In the reboot, the L2 weapons are very fast and less damaging, and the R2 weapons are slower and more damaging. It really feels like the other weapons are more effective throughout the course of the game, but I did still use Rebellion fairly regularly. Initially I thought Osiris was pretty terrible, but I found it kinda decent against some enemies. The biggest issue I have with it is that the damage ramps up as you damage enemies throughout the course of the fight. That means it starts off being pathetically weak and then eventually becomes reasonable, but it never reaches overpowered status. The prop shredder minces enemies and the huge sweeping attacks are quite good at destroying stuff while airborne. This was my dedicated weapon for killing the witch enemies since the shields are, guess what, color-coded blue. I found Arbiter to be too slow to be really effective, but I used it against enemies I basically had to, like the big armor dudes. That is until the second R2 Devil Arm comes into play. Erdix is basically the equivalent of Beowulf or Ifrit. They're gauntlets. They have super strong charge attacks, guard breaking capabilities, and it hits significantly faster than the Arbiter does. It also feels just stronger overall as well. Once I got the gauntlets, I shelved the Arbiter in its entirety. I transferred all the upgrades I put into it into the gauntlets. I found Aquila to be the most interesting Devil Arm. It feels the most unique to use, and you can have some cool combo potential by throwing glaives out to stun enemies while you focus on another one. I found it to be significantly more powerful than the Osiris overall, except against witches for some reason. The way the Devil Arms are set up is kind of unfortunate because it makes it feel like Arbiter and Osiris completely get replaced. The Erdix gauntlets and Aquila fill the exact same roles as Arbiter and Osiris. You got a strong super slow weapon that breaks shields and a strong super slow weapon that breaks shields. And you got a fast weak weapon that can stunlock enemies and a fast weak weapon that can stunlock enemies. I'd much rather there have been some diversity. Weapons never got outright replaced in the other games. They all had their own pluses and minuses to using them. They all felt unique and distinct, which is a mistake I think Devil May Cry Reboot makes. I like the idea of Limbo conceptually. I just think the novelty wears off very fast. The idea of an alternate world that's twisting and turning is pretty cool. It'd be cool a few times, but it's for the entire game. The choice to constantly have words popping up in the architecture is okay, and it's kind of cool at points, but overall I don't really care for it. It's an interesting choice, but I feel like it being used for the entirety of the game isn't particularly well thought out. Graphically, it's passable. Ninja Theory has always been pretty good with the graphical quality, much like Naughty Dog. It feels like it's their focus, but they've never really been that groundbreaking. It's good enough that it doesn't really deserve any harsh criticism. I feel like the introduction of the game was largely a slap in the face to fans of the previous Devil May Cry series. Dante was cool not because he tried to be cool, he just was. He was a badass demon hunter who just loved to slice a pizza. This Dante's cool factor is absolutely shoved down your throat and it comes off as very cringeworthy and pathetic. He does get toned down throughout the course of the game, but it's just not the same. This isn't Dante that we know. This isn't Devil May Cry. I hated the music in the reboot so much that I turned it down to 50% or less volume. I guess it feels more like punk rock rather than the heavy metal soundtracks of the previous games. Now, the original Devil May Cry soundtracks had some very cringe-inducing moments, but I could at least tolerate it because it felt fitting in the context of the game. I didn't feel like the soundtrack worked very well here. Then there's just the little things. Why is the first option post-mission not next mission and instead it's on the bottom? Why is submit your score to the leaderboards the first option? It doesn't make any sense. It feels like they got everything in the reverse. Why on earth would leaderboards be the first option? Yeah, come on, Ninja Theory, get your act together. DmC, Devil May Cry, Definitive Edition is very, very easy. The series' pedigree is partly known for its difficulty that just isn't present here. I suppose it's better to look at this game's pedigree as Heavenly Sword and Enslaved Odyssey to the West rather than Devil May Cry 1 through 4. There are a lot of casualizations, like you can remove upgrades from things whenever you want and reallocate them to different weapons or abilities. I have mixed feelings about that. On one hand, if you did something stupid like dump points into the worthless guns, you can get them back. On the other hand, it just means you get a new weapon, you remove all the points from the old one and dump them into the new one. After playing 4 missions on normal, I had to try it with the turbo mode enabled, which makes the game 20% faster. Turbo mode enabled requires you to use an iota of your brain, but I still found it incredibly easy. I only used a handful of items throughout the course of the game, and that was more because I didn't want to be inconvenienced to actually try to dodge. Turbo mode should just be enabled by default, honestly. Seriously, if you played without turbo mode, I'm pretty sure you could easily beat it without getting hit on the normal difficulty. 20% speed up might not sound like a lot, but it speeds up everything, including just running around. I would strongly recommend playing on turbo just because of that fact alone. You do a lot of running around and a lot of the exact same platforming frequently throughout the game. I never really did any of the extra challenges and found very little health and devil trigger upgrades. Despite that, I still had very little difficulty with the game. I only used a handful of items throughout the game and I never felt like I really ever needed to. I was so disinterested that I just dumped 2 Devil Star L's at the final boss to get the last phase over and done with by just spamming attacks instead of trying to dodge. I never died, so I don't know how checkpoints work or if there are any. I'm not nearly as good at action games as I was when I was in high school, but I still found Devil May Cry ridiculously easy. Sure, I wasn't getting the triple S combos on the regular, but I also wasn't actively trying to. I would frequently get to S or above consistently, especially since it's easy as hell if you use a Killa on a group of trash mobs. None of the bosses were particularly hard, and a lot of them are just kind of scripted sequences. It's not very engaging. I think the hardest part are just the elite enemies that teleport around. I found that I basically just used my devil trigger on them since they're the kind of enemies that just block everything otherwise. I didn't really feel like I got good at fighting them. I just kind of spammed devil trigger. The whole game is easy, which largely disengages you from it for the most part. The first 2 missions especially turned me off because it's combat cutscene with very poor flow. This is just constant. It's seriously after every fight you get a cutscene. It was just the worst. I was hoping for an action game and I got this instead. I beat it in a single session with a 10-minute break every 3 missions or so. I found it to be very drawn out. My total playtime was 6 hours and 16 minutes on the dot. A few of the missions are just complete fluff, like the one where you basically just grapple for the entire time by chasing Virgil and Kat in the car. Speaking of fluff, let's talk about Virgil's Downfall DLC. Virgil's Downfall is an hour and a half long. It's genuinely easy, just like the main game. It has all the same problems as the main game, with far too much platforming and cutscenes. About half of the cutscenes are also replaced with this really awful looking black and white 2D paper aesthetic, and it just looks really rushed and just terrible. There are 6 missions total. The last mission is just a repeat of the first mission, which is very lazy. The one boss fight is just a slightly redone version of the final boss fight in the main game, which now includes really boring and annoying sections where you can't fight back and you have to dodge attacks for a set period of time. Virgil feels a lot stronger than Dante. I think that's just because he has way more overpowered abilities and you ramp up in power significantly faster due to it being 6 missions versus 20 in the main game. You can't do infinite juggling as much, but your devil trigger swords are insanely overpowered. Virgil just isn't that different from Dante overall, and he only has 1 weapon, so it feels very underwhelming. It was alright for being extra content included in the Definitive Edition. I almost think it's not even worth playing if you own the Definitive Edition. I can't fathom paying retail price for it. They're asking $9 Canadian on Steam right now, and that is absolutely ridiculous for what you get. Total clocked game time of the main game and DLC was under 8 hours. That's from game start to credits end on both. All cutscenes, all gameplay, all end of missions, less than 8 hours. This is really nothing like the Devil May Cry I know and love. I don't think it's awful, but did Devil May Cry need a reboot? And even if it did Ninja Theory have to make it? Was no one else available? Why not give it to Platinum? They would have made an incredible Devil May Cry. I'll concede, it's probably the best Ninja Theory has done all around. I respect that they're trying and actively making better games, but I think so many decisions were just boring or so mishandled. There's so much platforming with 0 stakes. They're so heavy-handed with the cutscenes that it's just ridiculous. Combat requires 0 skill besides being able to match the colors, and I could do that when I was in kindergarten. Combat is so absolutely mindless that it is genuinely boring. Turbo mode shouldn't even be an option, it should be permanently enabled because that's the only way the game has any semblance of difficulty. I honestly probably should have played it on the harder difficulties, and if I did, I would probably still say it was too easy. If this was any other IP or a new IP, I might be able to give it a pass. It's the best game Ninja Theory has made, but when your resume is filled with mediocrity, is that really something to be proud of? Play this only if you're an extremely casual action game player. If you want something with a little more substance, grab Devil May Cry 1, 3, 4, God Hand, Ninja Gaiden Black, Ninja Gaiden 2, Bayonetta, and a slew of other great action games instead. If you want a Devil May Cry game on PS4, do yourself a favor and import the DmC 4 Special Edition. I can assure you it's a better game, and there's a lot more bang for your buck there. You're at 3 strikes, Ninja Theory. You're out of here. As far as I'm concerned, Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice will no doubt be more of the exact same thing we've seen. I can already assert that the lead character is going to be yet another sympathy-pandering, damaged female and will have a terribly boring combat system based solely on what we've already seen them deliver. Goodbye, Ninja Theory. We're done.